Alright guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today I'll be doing my preview and prediction for Penn State and West Virginia. 8.5 point line in favor of the Nittany Lions. 51.5 is the total. 12 p.m. Eastern Time on Fox, live from Morgantown. Looking at the Penn State offense, Drew Aller, a guy who's expected to take big leaps this year, or at least is going to have to if Penn State wants to compete for a lock in the playoffs. This is a guy who struggled big time on the road last year, and obviously this test is not going to be any easier. Granted, it's not a night game. Morgantown is still a very, tough road environment. This is a guy last year who was not very good against Ohio State. His last true road game, though, was against Maryland, where he had 240 and 4 touchdowns. Before that, Illinois wasn't a great game. Northwestern was quite poor. So this is a guy that has a tendency to not show up outside of playing in the state of Pennsylvania. So that's certainly something you want to monitor, is how Drew Aller will look. A guy that only had 2 interceptions last season. So he certainly did a great job protecting the ball. Less than 7 yards per attempt, though. Downfield certainly struggled for a variety of reasons. Not just Drew. Of course, the offensive line had its issues, but the receiving group, certainly less than a stellar group. They pick up Julian Fleming, though, from Ohio State, a guy who has, good size and speed at 6'2", 210, has some good ball skills, route running as well. They're hoping he can provide a big spark for this wide receiver group. Harrison Wallace, Caden Saunders, some guys that have some speed. Mari Evans, a veteran in the group, they're expecting to get involved. It's not the greatest of wide receiver groups. Even still, it wasn't a great offseason outside of Fleming. And, of course, that tight end Tyler Warren is a stud, a guy who's a high-level athlete with some strong hands. I like his physicality and yards after catch ability. So they have a great tight end there, Theo Johnson depart, so it's really just up to him. But that's really going to be the biggest thing, though, is, on the road, can this passing attack just be in rhythm and be in sync? And obviously, I think Aller will continue to protect the ball. But, I think when it comes to decision-making, he'll certainly need to be consistent there and just finding open targets because, sometimes there'll be checkdowns. His tight ends will be available for a couple of yards. I think that's the biggest way to offset the lack of a downfield passing attack is just be consistent in the intermediate range. And I think that's something Aller is certainly capable of, as he's proven to have a big arm in the past. He can certainly uncork a deep ball if he's, I would certainly say. You look at this running back room led by Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen. They have a pretty good matchup here. The West Virginia run defense wasn't all that ideal last year. I think they may be even in line for a step back now. They have so much youth in the middle of their defense at linebacker. We'll, of course, get to the West Virginia defense a little bit later and discuss that matchup more in detail. But, Singleton, this is a guy at 6'2", 219. Great speed on the edge, some good strength and toughness as well. Allen, on the other hand, has great leg drive, patience, vision. Those all check out. Very decisive in the open field as well. Very good 1-2 punch to have here. This is the part of their offense that can really thrive for them, but they just don't seem to have ideal balance with the passing attack, lacking its ability to go downfield. But I think in this matchup, these guys had 13 carries per game, pretty identical numbers last season. You're going to see them get a lot of work. I think in this matchup, getting to the edge and trying to put those linebackers in peril is going to be ideal for Penn State. And of course, it's behind an offensive line that's kind of, saw some reconstruction in terms of the future. I think they have a lot of young talents that have, high billing coming out of high school in terms of, being recruited. So I think long-term they're going to be fine. But for this year's unit, you certainly wonder how they'll play. Drew Shelton's going to take over for Olu Fashanu at left tackle. He's been all right. Struggled badly, though, in pass protection. Wasn't very good in the bowl game. Vega Iona returns at left guard. Nick Dawkins, a guy who's been in the program for many years, wasn't really good in his brief appearances. He'll have to replace a physical blocker, though. And then at 6'3", 330, Sal Wormley, his third year as a starter. He's also been, a bit of a liability in pass protection at right guard. You'll also insert a new right tackle, Nolan Rucci, a transfer they picked up. So this is an offensive line, all the guys behind him, high-end recruit Billings. Rucci coming over from Wisconsin, that is, played a couple of snaps. Right now, the starting lineup seems very iffy. This group's got to be physical, and I think it's always been kind of a weakness of theirs on the interior, and that's why they've struggled to run the ball and, be able to, spark or downfield passing games, because the interior just seems to get beat up more often than not. But they have capable guys here with size, and if they can improve, that's certainly going to be an area for this offense that can certainly thrive. Now moving to the West Virginia offense, this group is a big reason why so many people are high on West Virginia moving into the year. Over 31 points per game last year, top 30 in yards per contest, and of course they were fourth nationally running the ball. They're led by Garrett Green, one of the nation's better dual threats. A guy who's a physical runner, can throw with some nice pace downfield with some nice power. The downfield touch is pretty good. He's, of course, a phenomenal runner as well. I mean, this is a guy that was very productive a season ago. 2,400 yards passing, 16 touchdowns, 4 picks, 772 and 13 on the ground. And obviously, the passing numbers, with 4 picks is great. Only 200 yards per game, kind of alludes to the balance they have, because that was only on about 23 attempts per contest. This 53% completion rating, certainly less than stellar. He's going to go up against a very tough matchup in Penn State. Well, they're very sound against the run, and this is a guy who's going to have to make plays with this physicality and elusiveness on the edge. And of course, you're going to see a heavy dosage of this backfield as well, led by C.J. Donaldson and Jaheim White. Donaldson's more of a power runner, 800 yards and 11 touchdowns. Jaheim White, though, was a massive breakout player, really out of nowhere over the final month of the season, showcasing great speed and quickness. Had some major big plays in the receiving game as well. Highly efficient player at 5'9", 172. And, of course, back to Donaldson, a guy who, enters his third year in the program. A physical runner, good speed for his size. He's got nice patience for being about 240 pounds. And they, of course, have a third-year player, Jalen Anderson, as well. So I think they're very happy with what they have in terms of being able to run the ball, in terms of bodies. Of course, it's just going to come down to this offensive line. Can they win at the point of attack? And, of course, it starts with an elite left tackle in Wyatt Mellum. He's considered one of the nation's best, was phenomenal in pass protection, and has shown dominance in the run game. So that's part of the offensive line they're going to run towards often. Left guard, Thomas Remack, he was pretty solid. They do lose Zach Frazier, though. I think Brendan Yates should be a more than adequate replacement after a pretty good year at right guard. Will need to be better in run blocking, though, so this will be a tough matchup for him. And, of course, Doug Nestor's gone. Nick Malone will take over. He played a good bit at both tackle spots. So the 2 losses they have were major. In terms of season projection, shouldn't be a major issue for West Virginia. But in this game, what will they be able to do against a very deep front? It's going to be incredibly physical. This is the bread and butter of this offense. So if they're not being able to run the ball, what's going to happen? This is a team that had 420-plus rushing yards, nearly 10 yards per carry, in a victory over Cincinnati. So this is a team that was very good at running the football. It very rarely got, stuck in the mud. Last year they had 146 on 40 attempts and 2 scores against Penn State. So they weren't flat out awful running the ball. I thought that was a pretty resilient effort going on the road there. So this is going to be a big key, focal point for West Virginia, of course. Now looking at the wide receiver group, this is a Penn State secondary that didn't look good in the bowl game. Obviously, the confidence wasn't phenomenal there. They've had plenty of months since then to put that behind them. So they're going to be playing against, a team that's got a lot of, newfound, pep in their step, a lot of new talent they're plugging in there. They've had, opportunities. They get a lot of reps in practice. So it's not going to be the same secondary you saw get torturized versus Ole Miss. Looking at some of the guys they have, Hudson Clement, Traylon Ray, very good true freshman last season, very capable ex-pass catchers. Preston Fox has good versatility. I mean, this was a team that has, a lot of youth at wide receiver. They, of course, pick up Jaden Bray from Oklahoma State. So there's some different guys in this room I think can certainly produce, and you certainly want to start with that of those young guys and sophomores. Clement, 480 yards and 21 yards per catch. Ray, he had 17.8 yards per catch, and I certainly think they have some guys here that can win deep downfield, off-play action if the run game is clicking. If not, you certainly wonder who's going to step up and create separation on a consistent basis. If they have to win the drop-back passing game, is West Virginia capable of doing that? I'm not quite sure. This is a team I think can be good off play action. Green on the move can be stout for them throwing the football. But in terms of just, raw drop back passing, I'm not sure. But they do have a nice tight end as well. And Cole Taylor will certainly help, on short down distances. The red zone, of course, he had 4 touchdowns last year. So this is a veteran receiving group by all means. They do lose their top pass catcher, Devin Carter. Other than that, pretty much everyone's back, though. I think they'll be better this season through the air. Certainly a relatively tough matchup, though, for them to, prove their muscle. Now looking at the Penn State defense, obviously this unit's incredibly tough, very deep in the trenches. A team that was first nationally against the run last season. And of course, it starts with a phenomenal edge rushing duo of Danny Dennis Sutton, a guy who as an ex-5-star showcased good power moves, great ability to really just bully offensive linemen. Abdul Carter is going to make that transition down to the defensive end spot, showcasing great downhill trigger with instincts. He's got very fluid hips. Excels at really just sniffing out the run game. How will he do now that he's going to be more of a full-time DN other than middle linebacker certainly remains to be questioned. This is a guy who, moving down from the inside linebacking role to a 5-tech, is something that can be highly beneficial for them as well with his skills, because he's also very sound in coverage. So I think Carter, he's going to be tremendous for them. Phenomenal duo, though, nonetheless. on the interiors is where it gets juicy. Eamon Vanover figures to be a very respectable rotational piece. Zariah Fisher played a good bit, was very good against the run. Jamal Lyons was impressive, 6'5", 242. Devon Ellis had a breakout season, was also great versus the run. Zane Durant, a guy that you can also count on, Hakeem Beeman, and Keziah Izzard. These are a lot of names here because this is just so much experience they have back. It was just great against the run. A lot of big bodies here. Physical group overall. It figures to seem that they're going to win this matchup in the trenches against a very good offensive line. It's going to be a very competitive one, though. I don't think they're just going to steamroll the Mountaineers by any means, but I think in terms of goal line, short down and distances, third, fourth, and short, it seems very winnable for Penn State. And you certainly, when it comes to defending the run, worry about the linebacking group because it's more of a young unit. Of course, Carter transfers down. Kobe King is going to be the leader here. It's a guy that would do very well last year. I thought he was a great asset for him. He thrived against the run in his own right. A veteran leadership. That presence is going to be big for this unit. Who else will step up, though? Tony Rojas got on the field a good bit last year. Dominic DeLuca, he's played a lot in his career. Tyler Elston, he's been a good player in his 4 years at Penn State. What is he going to be able to provide in this game? So I guess, they have some youth, but overall they do have a lot of, snaps in terms of depth. So this is a linebacker group I'm somewhat worried about, but I'm not all that, crazed about because I think this defensive line is so good, and King really was a leader for them. And now that, he doesn't have Carter there, he's going to understand the importance of playing better football on a consistent basis. So I think this is going to be a win-win for everybody. But if that's one thing you want to attack, it's maybe the eye discipline of these younger linebackers. But you have to be able to run the ball to establish that. Misdirection plays as well. Overall, it's going to be, big on big. It's going to be a physical ground game against Penn State's nasty defensive line. Who will win this one? More likely than not, it'll probably be the Nittany Lions. And now, of course, you move to that secondary. Cam Miller was one of those corners that played in the bowl game. It wasn't very good. Of course, he's had an entire offseason, to get better. A former 5-star in A.J. Harris. I think he's going to be a big breakout player for them as an aggressive playmaker. He's a good jam press corner, highly competitive. Jalen Kimber arrives, a guy who's, played at the Georgia and Florida schools, coming over to have some type of role here in this Penn State defense. And, that's what you want to look, is how these guys play. Davian Collins as well. It seems like playing time might be open for grabs with these corners. I think Miller and Harris, these are going to be the main ones you lean on. And, Jalen Reed, of course, is going to be the nickelback, a very good player there. So there's not many concerns. He's another guy that wasn't all ideal in the bowl game, but I think, a massive offseason for them in this system is going to pay dividends for them. And you have a safety group here, and Kevin Winston is a key Wheatley. It's one of the best duos in the country. I think Winston is a guy that, had a phenomenal year. Led the team in tackles, showed good coverage skills, good ability to break on the ball, highly sound run defender. I think he's going to be a big leader for them. Wheatley, I think he should really emerge this year. He's going to step into a full-time role. A lot of people are high on his upside. And, of course, behind them, Dave Dakari Nelson, who's a former top 150 recruit, and Lamont Payne. He'll be in the role in some point. I think this is, Reed was mainly playing safety last year. We'll move down to nickel, so he's a veteran that's been around for a good bit. So this is, a Tom Allen defense and a bit of a 4-2-5 that certainly has some kinks to work out in the secondary, but I'm not all that worried. I think in this matchup, they're going to be able to play very sound football. And even though there is versatility they're facing in the West Virginia wide receiver group, I'm not all that worried about it because I think they're going to be able to generate enough pressure on Green. I think they'll have them, in second and third and long. So it's going to give them an opportunity to cook up front. The secondary, they have to be stout, though. They can't get burned off play action if the opportunity arises for it. I don't think you're going to see too many ideas in terms of being able to have hard play actions. I don't think the run game will be that stout, but that's certainly something you want to watch. And overall, just coverage one-on-one with these corners because last time, they played Ole Miss, they weren't very good in doing so. You're going to put that behind them here, though. I think it's certainly a notion that'll disappear very quickly. Now moving ahead to the West Virginia defense, you'll start with their abilities in the trenches. This is a team that had a couple of poor games against the run, but overall it was a pretty marginal unit. They were pretty solid, allowing less than 150 in last year's matchup. About 4.1 yards per carry, though, 4.2 on the year. This is a team that has some turnover up front, though. They do return Sean Martin, but a quality player for them. Tyron Bradley, those are two seniors that can provide leadership for them. Ty French comes over from Gardner Webb. What kind of role will he have? TJ Jackson from Troy was an elite run defender, so he's a guy that's really going to have to step up in this game for them. On the interior, Fatorma Moba, great run defender. It's a guy they're going to look to. Player from Finland, Edward Versarine, at 284 pounds, pretty solid. The entire defensive line, has a lot of snaps, though, for West Virginia. It's a bit of a veteran unit, so that's certainly great news for them in terms of, high-end pass rushing skills. You don't really have them. They do lose a couple of guys that were able to provide sacks for them. Unit had 33 as a team. Pretty respectable number, but overall, there's no one you can really point to with a confident D end that's going to come off the edge and make plays. So I think this is a veteran D line that will have a good game here. But the biggest concern is the linebacking group. It might be the youngest one in America. Josiah Trotter, redshirt freshman. Trey Lathan, a redshirt sophomore. Those figured to be the starters. Ben Cutter got on the field a good bit last year. He was no good in his true freshman campaign. It seems like they're only going to get better. The aforementioned Trotter was a very physically imposing player. Didn't play last year, though. Had high school experience, as an inside linebacker. So there's going to be, him trying to lean on his old days. And, 5 games for Lathan before he got hurt with a leg injury. And he wasn't very good versus the run. And, consistency as a tackler was lacking. So even though I think this D-line can have a good game, the linebacking group, Penn State, I don't expect them to be ultra creative. At least that's been the notion in the past. But now under Andy Kolanecki, that's a run game that was very great at Kansas. So it's certainly going to be a lot of different concepts coming at you. So it's not going to be the same attack they saw, last year in terms of lack of creativity. I think the ground game's certainly going to possess some things for these young guys that might not be, ideal for them to manage. So that's a big key in this game is the linebackers, fill in the correct gaps, gap integrity, be a discipline on the edge because this is some real skill here, and these guys are going to get the football. Again, about 13 attempts per game for both of those running backs. It's going to be a heavy dosage from Allen and Singleton. How they manage is certainly a big thing you want to monitor. And looking at the secondary for West Virginia, a lot of transfers in the back end for them. You really just don't know who's going to do what. Aiden Garnes, Garnett Hollins Jr. coming up from Northwestern, Jaheim Joseph, TJ Crandall. There's some solid guys that transfer over here. But overall, there's just a lot of plug-and-play pieces. And you got a redshirt freshman maybe stepping in Josiah Jackson at one of their safety spots. Anthony Wilson, a guy who's a veteran. Aubrey Burks, one of the nation's best at his position. This guy's tremendous in coverage. Plays a bit of a versatile role for them. It's a wave of newcomers, though, in this back end. How will they play? Beanie Bishop was an elite playmaker. He departs now. So what can they do in terms of replacing his ball skill production? The good news is they're not playing the greatest of wide receiver groups, obviously. In one-on-one coverage against Julian Fleming, a guy who's probably going to get a lot of targets. That's something you got to watch. Tyler Warren defending him. That's also a key for the linebackers. There's 2 players right there that could certainly have a bit of an advantage. But there is some speed in the Penn State wide receiving group, and if you're not, focused up in the back end, the middle of your defense, they can certainly burn you vertically. And guys like Wallace and Sanders. So you certainly want to monitor that there. Obviously, this is not the greatest of threats when it comes to, the Penn State passing attack. But I think they can shock some people because they will have better creativity. The interior should showcase some more strength. And I think overall this run game is really going to take a toll on these linebackers. Looking at the team comparison, I'm going to give Garrett Green the edge at quarterback. I think Aller's, a good player. Certainly not a great one. Certainly want to see him take some more risks this year, and how will he do when he, in terms of accuracy and, turnover rate. When he's taking more risks, what will that provide for them? But a dual threat guy in Garrett Green has really earned his stripes. I think it's quite even at running back. I know Allen and Singleton are tremendous, but I think, the emergence of Jaheim White really gives them something, that being the Mountaineers, and the Donaldson's been great for 2 years. So, both teams have a great 1-2 punch. I think it's best to just call it even and give them both respect on that one. Wide receiver group for West Virginia getting the nod along with the offensive line. Obviously led by, again, left tackle Wyatt Millam, who's just tremendous. A lot of veterans on both sides of the ball, though. But, you replace 2 tackles for Penn State, and that certainly kind of puts them behind the curve. But when you look on the defensive side of the ball, it's a clean sweep with ease. Not much competition here. The D-line's incredibly deeper. They have more skill, more versatility as well. Better production. Linebacking group, I think they're deeper across the board, while West Virginia has one of the more concerning units in their own conference. And then the secondary led by a great safety group for Penn State. So pretty easy there for them. Leading to the final thoughts and the prediction, for Penn State, dominate the run game on both sides. You got to allow Aller to be comfortable in certain situations. And I think it's certainly something you look to them doing, attacking the weakness of the linebacking group, your own defensive line kind of taking over this game. And again, I don't think they're just going to completely body them and hold them to that 75 yards per game mark that they had been holding opponents to last year. I think they'll be in line for about 150 yards maybe allowed. 2.6 yards per carry, though. I think West Virginia, they're going to look to run the ball a lot, so certainly won't have the greatest of average. I think about 150 yards, though, is the max they may give up in this one. maybe a big player to help spark some better production for West Virginia. I think overall it's certainly going to be controlled by them. And obviously, that's the biggest key for WVU. They can't be stonewalled. They need to find some room. And I think about 150 yards again, that might be enough to put them in a position to win this game. Obviously, they got to win in those passing situations and second and third and longs. And, I think they will from time to time, but I don't know if it's going to be enough. Third and 10, completed for about 6 yards on an out route or something. I think it's going to be hard to find space. So they're going to have to live in, third and shorts. And I just don't think that's something they're going to be able to do consistently. Obviously, this is a healthy upset pick. 26-17 for me, with the line being at 8.5. That's going to be a cover for Penn State. It's obviously a very tricky game. It being at noon instead of night, though, certainly is a big help. I think all are getting a bit better OC in the building, and Kalinecki is going to be beneficial. I think overall this defense is just too much for West Virginia offense. They can, really shock some people. You might see them just totally, blow them out of the water in terms of production, and the run game might just come out swinging. Don't think that's going to happen, though. I do not expect West Virginia to showcase a phenomenal offensive showing here, even though they have the pieces to do so, and they'll still be effective in conference. I think for week one, this is just not the ideal matchup for you. The defensive line's too good. The pass rushing is too good. Even though they have players capable in the trenches of dealing with PSU, this is just a different animal when it comes to athleticism on the defensive side of the ball. So I'm expecting them to be strong in that area, and I think we'll see much better balance from Penn State. That's going to be it for today's episode. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.